Modifier essentials, umbrella versus softbox versus beauty dish. Probably the three most common lighting modifiers are umbrellas, softboxes, and beauty dishes. But what do they have in common and where do they differ? If I had to recommend just one, which one would I choose? So we're going to take a moment and compare these three common lighting tools so you understand the pros and cons of each, and then maybe you can figure out which one is going to be best for you or maybe best for a particular shoot. Umbrellas. All right, what's great about umbrellas is that they're super cheap and super easy to set up, which is great for beginners. You simply pop them open and they're ready to go. This makes it very, very easy to use if you're on location or if you don't have a lot of time to set up. Entry-level umbrellas, smaller without any bells and whistles, usually cost less than $30. And obviously these prices increase as you get some more specialty considerations, but it's nice and inexpensive. The downside of umbrellas is that they don't give you quite as much control over the light as other modifiers might allow you. The light tends to flood the scene, it spreads everywhere. So if you want to block the light from an umbrella, maybe hitting the background, it's going to take a little bit more effort. But if you're trying to light everything, an umbrella would be great. We're going to discuss this a bit more in depth when we cover flags and feathering the light. We'll talk about how to control the light coming out of an umbrella. Personally, when I use umbrellas, I select a large umbrella with diffusion, and this helps me create light that's large, it's soft, it's perfect for portraits, it's great for lighting entire scenes. And I recommend somewhere in the 43-inch or larger for umbrellas. My favorite portrait umbrella is about 65 inches in diameter. It's great for full-length shots, for group shots, for lighting an entire scene. And the other thing is, if I use a softbox of similar size, it's going to be so much harder to put together. Now, if you're buying an umbrella and you don't have diffusion, I recommend a white umbrella to keep the portrait light nice and soft. But if you do have diffusion, which is what I recommend, the difference between the silver and white, it's really practically a minimal difference. Now, one more option to consider is if I have to choose a narrower or deeper umbrella, I'm going for the deeper umbrella. This depth provides me the ability to control the light better. It's going to allow me to feather the light and control the spread of light. Now, you can certainly still produce beautiful light without the depth, but I find it gives me more control. So if you're a portrait photographer shooting in a studio, I'd aim for an umbrella that is larger because it'll give you softer light, and diffusion because it will give you softer light. This is a great option when you're trying to light from head to toe because it gives you a lot of spread, but make sure you purchase that diffusion. If you are shooting in a very small space with low ceilings, you probably have to go for a little bit of smaller umbrella because you'll always want to have the light even or usually above the subject's eye level and pointed downward for flattering results. For example, if you go with a 5-foot wide umbrella in a space that has 8-foot tall ceilings, you're not going to be able to manage to get the right angle of light. So go big, but go for what's practical in your space. If you shoot outside a lot, an umbrella may not be the best option because it can create a big sail to catch the wind. But if you're on location inside, it's great because it's easy to set up. Other options do exist for location lighting that allow you quick setup for your modifiers, also soft light, not worrying about the wind. And I've listed some of these recommendations for location lighting gear in the gear guide. So definitely check that out if you want more information. So one final thing that is great about umbrellas is they're pretty much near universal. Typically, a strobe has a place where you can actually put the pole of the umbrella into the strobe. And this means you don't have to worry about proprietary speed rings or adapters to make that umbrella work. So when you upgrade to a different brand, it's still going to work. I will note they technically come in 2 different thicknesses of the shaft of the umbrella, 7 millimeters and 8 millimeters. And so some strobes are made for a particular size, but for the most part, it's universal. So the pros of the umbrella is they're inexpensive, easy to set up, and universal for usage. The cons is that they're harder to control the spread of light. Softboxes. Softboxes give me the ability to soften my light while still having a bit more control over the direction and the spill. For most portrait photographers, a softbox tends to be their first modifier purchase. Softboxes create soft, beautiful, flattering quality of light on your subject, and also the ability to change the direction of the light a little bit more easily, and you block it off the background if you want to, or block it off part of the body. The light doesn't spread everywhere like you would have with an umbrella. Some softboxes have an inner diffusion, or most do, and that inner diffusion material actually softens the light even more. If you mainly shoot headshots and you're kind of a tighter composition, a small softbox is going to be sufficient. If you shoot larger and you want a larger spread of light, maybe for groups, you might want to get a larger softbox. Now, there are 2 main downsides of a softbox. And first, they're typically a lot more expensive compared to an umbrella. And while they're not the most expensive modifier out there by any means, they're not your cheapest option either. So it depends on kind of what your budget is. Now, one of the other downsides of a softbox is that they are more time consuming and difficult to set up. And for each softbox, you're going to need to set it up in a speed ring. And sometimes those speed rings are proprietary to the brand, like how they attach to the strobe. So in other words, if you want to use that softbox again and you get another strobe, you're going to have to purchase another speed ring to make that softbox work with your new set of lights. So the pros are that a softbox creates soft light that gives you more control over where the light falls. The cons is that they're harder to set up, typically more expensive, and not universal in use. Beauty dish. A beauty dish provides light that is doubly reflected. It reflects into the center disc and then back out into the dish. And it's soft, but somehow it provides a bit more contrast, more pop to the light. And as the name suggests, it creates light that is often used for beauty photography of models or for headshots. The shadows are they're just a bit more defined, a little bit more crisp. So if you want contrast to a shot with brighter highlights and darker shadows, but still beautifully soft light on the skin, this modifier is a great solution. I often use this modifier if I want to emphasize the cheekbones or the jawline because the shadows will be more defined. Furthermore, with a beauty dish, you get a little bit more control over the direction and the spill of the light, especially with a grid, which we'll talk about later, compared to a large softbox or a large umbrella. With this being said, I like that additional contrast to the light, but it may emphasize some imperfections like wrinkles and blemishes. You can actually choose a silver versus white beauty dish. I recommend going with the white, especially if you shoot portraits, because the silver has too much contrast and it exaggerates imperfections. Beauty dishes are definitely more expensive than umbrellas, but they're often on par with softboxes depending on the size of the softbox. And one other downside of a beauty dish is that the dishes usually mount directly to the strobe with no speed ring. So this means if you ever change your brand of strobe, you're going to have to purchase a new beauty dish again. There typically aren't any adapters to make this universal, so that's another expense to keep in mind. While technically you can shoot a beauty dish full length, it's usually used for tighter shots, and it should be usually kept kind of closer to your subject to make the light nice and soft. So the pro of a beauty dish, it gives you more contrast to the light, but it's still soft and beautiful. It also gives you a bit more control over the spread of the light. The con is that you need proprietary mounts for each strobe, and it's more expensive than umbrella, and it's a little bit harsher than a softbox.